Здравейте, драги зрители на Еспорт България. Завръщаме се от малко по-променена дестинация. Намираме се в хотела точно до арената в Копенхаген, Дания. Тук-що приключиха срещите от полуфиналния ден. Остава ни само големия финал, а до мен е един от анализаторите, които всъщност работят на панела на официалния стрим и човека, който съвсем скоро всъщност стана ясно, че ще бъде част от анализаторския екип по време на големия финал. Интервюто, разбира се, ще бъде на английски, така че цялата тази дискусия ще трябва да е с субтитри или вие сами да си я преведете. But with that being said, I want to welcome my guest here, Bleh. Thank you for joining me, brother. First of all, I wanted to thank you again because the semifinals just ended. And everyone's really tired. You've been here for what, 3 weeks now, and you're probably quite exhausted, even though it's been an exciting event, right?
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm pretty excited and exhausted. But I want to say, like, that was a very smooth segue from Bulgarian to this. That was like super smooth. But yeah, it's tiring, but also it's a major. You know, you just have the little bit of adrenaline pumping through you, and I won't be able to sleep for the next couple of hours because it takes a while for the adrenaline to kind of calm down after being on the desk. So yeah, I'm totally okay. I'm tired, but I'm okay.
Okay, so you're technically the first ever analyst that I'm interviewing for Esports Bulgaria. So a lot of the Bulgarian fans might not necessarily be too aware of what an analyst should be doing, right? Because we've had a lot of chit-chats with coaches and stuff about the in-game analyst, but being an analyst on the desk is an entirely different thing. So can you try and put it into perspective? Like, what is the most important thing for you as an analyst to bring to the audience?
I think, I don't think it's one thing. I would broadly say two things, right? Firstly would be to try and tell the story. Try and narrate a tale of sort of like, you know, how a team or, you know, just tell the overall story of an event and how a team got here and how the other team got here and what this matchup means and trying to set up the stage for the audience watching, and so that when the casters come in, they're just going to be casting the action. We do all the setup for them. We'd be like, yo, it's going to be this team versus this team and how much history they have together. So that's one thing, and the second thing would be to entertain. I think that's something which newer analysts kind of struggle with a little bit, where it's like you got to tell the story and break down the games and get nerdy about it, but you also need to make sure people watching are focus on what he's saying, right? They're having a good time, they're laughing about it. So it's kind of like a mix between storytelling, talking about the game, and also trying to make sure that it's fun. It's an entertaining thing. You know, people want to tune in to watch you, you know, have fun, crack jokes. It's not just about just nerdy Counter-Strike talk. You got to marry those two things together and just, you know, try to put up a good show, basically.
I mean, this sounds like a recipe for success. One thing that I was really curious about, by the way, because now you've worked 4 majors in a row, which, by the way, congratulations on as an analyst. But was the analyst work the first thing that actually interested you when it comes down to esports? Because you're coming out of a smaller region too, like a less popular, well, not less populated, but less famous region when it comes down, especially to Counter-Strike. You're coming out from the Indian region. So how did you initially get into actually doing analyst work? And was that the first thing that you were doing in the industry?
No, I wasn't. I was actually streaming and casting games initially, especially in Asia, where there was no one really covering it in 2013, 14 for CSGO. And I was like, listen, the Asian scene used to be pretty good in 1.6, and there's no one really covering anything right now. So I'm like, you know, why don't I try just covering it, right? Just casting. I had no prior experience of just like talking about the game. And then over time, I started getting a little bit better at casting. I think it was an IEM. My second international event ever was in 2016 IEM Taipei, where I reached out to ESL. I'm like, hey, you know, you're having this event in Taipei, which was also the first Asian qualifier for a major. I'm like, I'd be happy to work as a caster. And they're like, we're going to get you as a caster, we're going to get you as an analyst. I'm like, never been an analyst before, but you know what, screw it, I'll do it. I'll give it a shot. And I was there. It was, if I remember right, it was Moses, it was Vendetta, and it was DDK as a host, which is kind of wild when you think about it. And I did it. I'm like, you know, I'll do whatever it takes. It's not what I'm used to, but something I'm comfortable with. I mean, not comfortable with, and I'm going to just make it work, right? So I was pretty rough around the edges for the first few years, and then I realized that since I didn't really have like a casting partner, so to speak, back then, the people were hiring me more, offering me more analyst gigs. And I'm like, why should I make, well, I should just say yes and give it a shot, right? And I tried it out. And even though over the years I've had opportunity to commentate games, I've done it in the past. I actually casted at the Antwerp Major as well. But overall, the analyst job kind of got like offered to me, and because of how the industry is, you try and kind of grab what you can, right? And I did it, and over time, I just got better at it, and eventually I'm like, this is going to be my career, and I'm like, I'm okay with this. I still get to work to Counter-Strike. It's great, and I'm still trying to improve my craft, so to speak. But I feel like, yeah, I didn't start off as an analyst. It's just something that was offered to me, and I'm like, I'll do it. It's another door leading to the same thing, kind of.
More naturally.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, screw it, I'll do it, and here we are.
Okay, and you did mention, you touched upon working on your craft, right? And this is something that I find really interesting as a topic, because obviously some of the people that are considered the best analysts in the world are ex-pro players, right? You're looking at people like Pimp, like Maniac, looking at people like Yanko, like Assad. All of those guys have played professional CS before, right? So how are you able to actually jump over that gap? And, because you yourself haven't played professional Counter-Strike, right? So how are you able to actually, compensate for the fact that those guys have been in the server, those guys have a wider view, so to speak, and understand what is going through a player's mind? So how are you able to actually learn and better your craft to that extent?
That's an interesting question, and it's true as well. I have played Counter-Strike quite a lot over the past 20 years. I used to play a lot of 1.6, but never the highest levels, right? Not like my colleagues, but I have always been a fan of the game. I tried to play to a higher level in 1.6, but didn't really have the resources, the team, the teammates and whatnot, but I was always been a student of the game, if that makes sense. I always used to enjoy watching the game. But one thing I learned was, I decided I'm going to be entertaining and focus on one thing which I know. And for me, it was more about storytelling initially. I know these Asian teams, I know these guys. So initially start off more about narration and storytelling and how these teams work and how vetoes work. And I still had a pretty fundamentally solid understanding of how the game works, but not to that much of a high level. But I learned as I went with, the more people I spoke to, I learned from my colleagues, I learned from speaking to players, watching stuff, getting to know other players as well, having chats with them and trying to understand like what goes in when it comes to playing on a stage and all these little things. And I think it's just about having an open mind and soaking everything in, learning more. Never say like, oh, I know enough already. And even to this day, I still try and learn as much as I can, right? I'll be out in the lobby, I'll just meet someone like Carrigan, I'll be like, yo, Finn, what's up? Because I've met him over the years, and I'll be like, so what's happening? What was that veto about? How do you guys feel? And I hear his thoughts, and like, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way, right? And you pick up these small little things, and eventually, even though I've never really played at that highest level, it is something which you can kind of compensate for, if that makes sense, right? And I look at someone like Thorin, for example, not necessarily someone who's ever played at any high level when it comes to Counter-Strike, but he was a mainstay on the desk, despite the fact he was never a pro. And it was for him, it was an entertainment factor and how he knows history about the game, while he might not be the most tactically sound mind when it comes to Counter-Strike. And I'm like, if you can do it to that high level, so can I. It's not about a ex-pro player having to be an analyst. If you know what you're talking about, if you understand the game to a high level, and if you're willing to be entertaining, I think anyone can.
I mean, I'm pretty happy with that one. And, to kind of round it out on that topic before I ask you on your opinion on what's been going on at the Major so far, is there a specific, obviously there's not going to be one specific thing, there's no right formula for it, but what would you say to people from smaller and different regions around the world that might be looking into trying to get into the talent scene, get into the industry and that on-camera segment, interviewers, casters, analysts and stuff like that? Because yourself, when you're not from the United Kingdom, you're not American, you're not Australian, it could be a bit of a bumpy road, right?
It can be a bit of a bumpy road, I 100% agree, but I feel like sometimes people get too just focus on just one thing. They want to only be a caster or a commentator, or they want to be just only an analyst or an interview. And I feel like sometimes you need to be able to adapt. I wanted to be a commentator. Eventually I wanted to be more of an analyst, while I still do a bit of commentary on the side. I think you need to learn to adapt and find, why would people hire you? Why would people want to listen to you? Like, what do you bring to the table that other people don't? And once you are able to find that niche, you can make it work. I look at people like like Heku, for example, like someone who is not a native English speaker, but she speaks a lot of languages and she is still learning a lot of new languages, where she's like, I can be the translator slash interviewer for like a lot of these players, because we have a lot of players coming from CIS and from the Central Europe or other places, wherever, who can't speak English as well, and she's like, I can fill that role. And I feel like she's a good example of how you can try and make it work for yourself in the industry. For me, the Asian region was something which is completely ignored or unknown, and I made it a point to just get to know these players, get to know these teams, understand how they play, what the stories are, and that was my gateway into the esports sphere, so to speak. And after that, I'm like, I want to do more. I want to do not just Asian Counter-Strike, but like EU, NA, whatever. And I was able to use that as the starting point, so to speak. Yeah, trampoline. That's a great example. A trampoline to a kind of, just put myself up there when it comes to what else I wanted to do, right? I think you just need to find your avenue. If I get into like different scenarios and how you can do it, it's just almost infinite, if you ask me. So I feel like just trying to understand what you're good at, or find a missing link which you feel that you can make happen. I think that's the right way to go about it. I don't necessarily think that, even though, yeah, sure, it's mostly the native English speakers who get an easier time, so to speak, I don't necessarily think that should be something which would keep people away from pursuing this as a job, as a passion, or whatever.
Okay, with that being said though, we did mention briefly that you've been hired for 4 majors in a row now as an analyst. You are doing the major final this time though. And does that make it, obviously it's your first time doing a final and the first CS2 major, does that make it special in any way?
Absolutely, it does. It's been a very long journey for me, and when I got hired for the PGL Stockholm Major, that was like the first major for me. It meant a lot, and at that point for me it was more really not my thing. I think being an analyst is much better. So Rio, again, analyst in the playoffs, fantastic time right there. And this job, you kind of look for certain milestones in life, in your job or whatever, and you got to keep pushing yourself. And for me, things like this helped me push myself. My first arena finals ever was IM Katowice last year, where I did it, I think, who was it with? I forgot. I think it was Stunner, myself, and I think Yanko on the desk, and that was my first arena thing, right? And after that, I'm like, all right, what about major finals? Is that ever going to happen? And last year when I didn't get the Paris major, I was a little bit disappointed, but then heading into this event, I had no expectations. I was like, I'm going to be working a major, which already is like such a great thing, such an honor to do. And the fact that PGL have given me the responsibility of doing the finals desk, it is great. And now for me, it's about finding something even more, like something better, something I can achieve further, right? But just getting to do this is such a massive thing for me, because I never, in a million years, back in 2014 when I started out, would have ever imagined I'd be working a CS major final.
But now you are, and you're following all the games really, really closely. So without talking about the final, I'm going to ask you about your prediction in a second. And obviously that interview is going to be uploaded after the game is over, so we're going to see if your prediction is going to be true. But we're not going to get into too much detail because we don't want to ruin your segment, right? But let me know, what's your highlight of the event so far in terms of the playoffs? Might be before that, but let's focus on the playoffs primarily. Whether it's a team that has over-exceeded your expectations, a team that has disappointed you in a way, a player, just give me your thoughts on that.
FaZe. Simple as that. Like FaZe against Spirit, everyone's like Spirit should be getting the win there, and Spirit were the favorites, so it's major, right? But for the fact that FaZe have just been the best team in CS2, they lost the finals in Blast World, fall to Vitality, they lost to Spirit in Katowice, but the fact that they still continue to fight, never gives up. Carrigan in Denmark, King Carrigan getting his major, that is for me is going to be the most memorable thing. And I won't answer your question, but even before you ask me, they're going to be winning the freaking major. Okay.
FaZe winning the freaking major. You heard it here, ladies and gents. Thank you a lot for joining me for that conversation, brother. It was great. I would have loved to have an even longer one, even though I anticipated this one to be like a 5-minute one, but you know, too interesting. Драги зрители, благодаря ви изключително много, че бяхте с нас. Аз съм Теодор Борисов, с мен разбира се беше Bleh. Утре предстои да видим дали неговия предикшън за всъщност победа на Face Clan ще се изпълни. Разбира се, в момента, в който гледате това интервю, ще се знае и ще видим колко всъщност анализаторите си разбират от работата. Ще се видим много скоро. Чао, чао!